I'm Liam, 29 years old, and my own father publicly disowned me in front of my entire family at a five-star restaurant. Before I tell you how that single evening led to the complete and utter collapse of their empire, do me a favor and let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. It's always incredible to see how far these stories travel. Alright, let's get into it. The air in the restaurant was thick with the scent of money. You know the kind. A mix of expensive perfume, aged leather from the ridiculously plush chairs, and the faint savory aroma of food you can't pronounce. The low hum of polite conversation was punctuated by the delicate clinking of crystal glasses. This was my father's natural habitat, a place to be seen, to perform. And tonight I was apparently the star of his show. My father, Richard Anderson, a man who built a local real estate empire and never let anyone forget it, had called this emergency family dinner. That alone should have been a red flag. Our family didn't do emergencies. We did scheduled appearances. Everyone was there. My mother, Eleanor, looking immaculate and unreadable. My younger brother, Ethan, the golden child, already smirking at me from across the table. My sister Chloe was busy scrolling through her phone, probably posting about the fancy dinner her important father was throwing. Aunts, uncles, cousins, the whole jury was assembled. For about an hour, it was painfully normal. Small talk, awkward questions about my job, the one they never understood. I'm a forensic accountant. I find financial fraud. To them, it was just a boring desk job. Nothing compared to Ethan's vague consulting role at our father's company. Then dessert was cleared and the performance began. My father stood up tapping his wine glass with a spoon. The clinking stopped. Every eye in the restaurant turned to our table. He had a way of commanding a room. I'll give him that. Thank you all for coming on such short notice. He began, his voice booming with false sincerity. He looked around the table, his gaze lingering on each smiling face before it landed on me. His expression hardened. As you know, family is everything to me. Loyalty, respect. These are the pillars of the Anderson name. He paused for dramatic effect, which is why it is with a heavy heart that Eleanor and I have made a difficult decision. He looked straight at me. The air crackled. Liam, he said, his voice dropping to a cold clinical tone. We've decided to cut you from the inheritance. Officially, we feel you've never deserved it. And your recent attitude has only confirmed that silence. A thick, suffocating silence that lasted for about 3 seconds. Then a snort came from Ethan that broke the dam. A ripple of laughter spread around the table. My Aunt Clara chuckled into her napkin. My Uncle Robert raised his glass in a mock toast. They were enjoying this. My mother, my own mother, had a faint, satisfied smile playing on her lips as she pretended to study the tablecloth. They all agreed. I was worthless. I was the family disappointment. And now it was official. They expected me to crumble, to beg, to cry, to make a scene. That's what they wanted. A grand finale to their little play. So I did something else. I picked up my wine glass, the deep red swirling inside. I met my father's gaze over the rim. Then I smiled, a slow, genuine smile. I took a calm sip, letting the wine sit on my tongue for a moment before swallowing. I placed the glass down gently. Congratulations, I said, my voice clear and steady. I hope it was worth it. Then I stood up, pushed my chair in, and walked out of the restaurant. I didn't look back. The silence that followed me out the door was more satisfying than any screaming match could ever have been. They expected a victim. They had no idea they were looking at the man who was about to become their executioner. The engine of my modest sedan was a dull hum compared to the roar in my head. The city lights blurred into long neon streaks as I drove. Not really heading anywhere specific, just away from the suffocating scent of their approval. A scent I choked on my entire life. My father's words echoed, but they weren't a fresh wound. They were just salt poured on a very, very old one. The inheritance that was just a symbol. The real currency in my family was validation. And I'd been bankrupt since birth. My mind drifted back to my 16th birthday. I'd worked for months at a grocery store to save up for a beat-up 1998 Honda Civic. I was so proud of it. I'd spent the whole weekend washing and waxing it. When I showed my dad, he barely glanced up from his newspaper. An accountant should drive something more respectable. Liam, not a tin can. 2 weeks later, Ethan turned 16. A brand new Mustang convertible was sitting in the driveway with a giant red bow on it. His grades were terrible. He crashed my mom's SUV the month before. It didn't matter. He was the golden child. He reflected my father's success. I apparently reflected only his disappointment. It was the same with everything. I got a partial academic scholarship to college, busting my tail to get the grades. My father's only comment was only partial. The Andersons don't do things halfway. I had to take out loans and work 2 jobs to cover the rest. I used my own meager savings to build my college fund. When Ethan got accepted into a private university, one my father's donations certainly helped with. A full trust was set up to cover everything, including a generous living stipend. They called it tough love for me and support for him. I called it what it was, a system designed to make me feel small. My job was another source of endless ridicule. Forensic accounting. You stare at spreadsheets all day like a glorified bookkeeper. Ethan would sneer at family gatherings. My father would just shake his head. I built this city with my bare hands, with vision. And my son, he chases decimals. They didn't see the skill, the intellect, the thrill of the hunt. They couldn't understand that I wasn't just chasing decimals. I was hunting predators. I was finding the truth hidden in the lies. A skill I was beginning to realize that was about to become incredibly useful. I pulled into the parking lot of my apartment building. It wasn't a luxury high-rise like the one my parents owned downtown or the trendy loft Ethan lived in. It was a simple, clean 2-bedroom place I'd bought with my own money from a salary I had earned. It was mine. Every square inch of it was a testament to the fact that I didn't need them. I sank onto my couch. The silence of the room a welcome relief. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Ethan. Don't think you can come crawling back later. This is final. Dad's serious this time. I stared at the screen. He thought this was about the money. They all did. They were so blinded by their own greed and arrogance. They couldn't see the real game being played. They thought they had just checkmated the pawn. They had no idea the pawn was just a few moves away from becoming a queen and taking the whole board. I didn't reply. I just saved a screenshot of the message. Evidence. It was time to start building my case. The whole thing started 3 months before that disastrous dinner. It started with a phone call from my mother. It was a Tuesday afternoon. I was neck-deep in a case tracing laundered money through a series of nail salons for a corporate client. My phone rang and Mom's picture popped up. I almost let it go to voicemail. Our conversations were always a minefield of passive-aggressive comments and questions about why I wasn't more like Ethan. But something made me answer, "Liam, honey, how are you?" Her voice was syrupy sweet. Red flag number 1. "I'm fine, Mom. Busy with work." "What's up?" "Oh, nothing much. I was just thinking about you." A pause. "Actually, darling, I was wondering if you could help your old mother with something." It's a silly little tax question. I sighed, leaning back in my office chair. "Mom, Dad has a whole team of high-priced accountants for that. I'm not a tax guy. I do fraud investigation." I know, she said quickly. "And we're so proud of your spreadsheets. But this is different. It's personal. A small investment I made, and I don't want to bother your father with it. You're so smart with numbers. I thought you could just take a quick look. It won't take long." Red flag number 2. She never went against my father ever. And she was laying the praise on thick. She was buttering me up for something. "I don't know, Mom. I'm really swamped." Then came the guilt. The weapon she wielded like a master surgeon. "Oh, okay. Dear, I understand. You're a very important man. I just thought after all we've done for you, a few minutes of your time wouldn't be too much to ask. But I was wrong. I'll figure it out myself." Her voice was laced with a theatrical tremor. The long-suffering mother, it was a classic move, and like an idiot, I fell for it every time. A part of me, the little boy who just wanted his mom's approval, still jumped to attention when she used that tone. "Okay, fine." I relented. Send the documents over. I'll look at them tonight. But no promises, Mom. This isn't my specialty. Oh, thank you, sweetie. You're a lifesaver. You've always been such a good boy. The documents arrived in my inbox an hour later. The subject line was minor tax question. I opened the attached zip file. It wasn't just one document. It was dozens. Bank statements, property deeds, incorporation papers for something called Sunrise Holdings LLC. This wasn't a minor tax question. This was a hornet's nest. I stared at the screen, a cold feeling creeping up my spine. My mother was either completely clueless about what she'd sent me, or she was far more cunning than I'd ever imagined. She had claimed this was a small investment she made. But my father's name, Richard Anderson, was on every single document. She had just handed me the keys to my father's secret kingdom, and she'd done it under the guise of asking for a favor. At the time, I thought she was just being careless. Looking back, I realized she might have been trying to trap me to see if I was loyal, to see if I'd find the dirt and help them bury it. They made a fatal miscalculation. They assumed that my blood loyalty to the family name was stronger than my loyalty to the truth. They forgot what I do for a living. I don't bury dirt. I bring it into the light. That night, I didn't sleep. My small apartment, usually a sanctuary, felt like a war room. My laptop was open on the coffee table. The glow of the screen painting the walls in a pale, sterile blue. The documents my mother had sent were a Pandora's box, and I was staring right into the abyss. At first glance, they looked legitimate. Complicated, sure, but that's how the rich play. Sunrise Holdings LLC was registered in Delaware. A classic move for anonymity. It owned a few commercial properties. Nothing too crazy. The bank statements showed money moving in and out, seemingly normal business transactions. But my job isn't about looking at the surface. It's about seeing the patterns underneath. It's like a language. And after years of doing this, I'm fluent. I started cross-referencing. I pulled public property records for the addresses listed. That's when I found the first crack. One of the properties owned by Sunrise Holdings was also listed as a major expense for one of my father's primary companies, Anderson Development. In other words, Anderson Development was paying exorbitant rent to a shell company that my father secretly owned. He was siphoning money from his own company, likely to defraud his business partners and, of course, the IRS. My heart started pounding. This was big. I kept digging. I followed the money trail from Sunrise Holdings. It didn't just sit there. It moved to another entity. This one, an offshore account in the Cayman Islands. Classic money laundering 101. From there, the trail got murky, but I could see large sums being wired back to accounts that paid for personal expenses, luxury cars, exotic vacations, even Chloe's failed boutique clothing store. But the real gut punch, the thing that made me physically sick to my stomach, was the nonprofit. Tucked away in the files was information on something called the Anderson Family Foundation for Urban Renewal. On paper, it was a charity for underprivileged kids. My father loved to talk about it at galas, soaking up the applause for his philanthropy. The bank statements told a different story. The foundation received hefty tax-deductible donations, mostly from my father's own companies, but very little of that money was going to urban renewal. Instead, I saw massive consulting fees paid to my mother. Event expenses for parties that were clearly just family vacations. The Anderson Family Foundation wasn't a charity. It was their personal piggy bank funded by tax fraud. They were literally stealing money meant for poor kids to fund their lavish lifestyle. I leaned back on my couch, the scale of it all crashing down on me. This wasn't just shady business. This was a criminal enterprise. My father wasn't just a ruthless businessman. He was a con artist, a fraud, and a thief. And my mother, the matriarch who preached family values, was his willing accomplice. The boy inside me who had spent his life seeking their approval died that night. He was replaced by a man who had seen the truth. And the truth was ugly, rotten, and sitting right in front of me in a series of neatly organized PDF files. They had underestimated me my entire life. They saw me as the quiet, boring accountant, the harmless son. They had no idea that the very skills they mocked were the ones that would give me the power to burn their whole corrupt world to the ground. For the first time, I felt a surge of something I hadn't felt in a long time. Power. Not the power of money or a family name, but the power of holding an undeniable catastrophic truth. Back in the present, just hours after the dinner, I was sitting in the dark of my apartment when my phone buzzed. It wasn't another taunt from Ethan. It was my grandmother, Isabella, my father's mother. She was the only one in the family who had ever shown me genuine kindness in her own quiet way. I answered, my voice a little rough. "Hello, Liam. It's Grandma." Her voice was frail, laced with an anxiety I wasn't used to hearing from her. "I'm so sorry, dear. About tonight. What Richard did, it was cruel, unforgivable." "It's okay, Grandma. I'm used to it." "No, it's not okay," she insisted. "They're fools, Liam. All of them. They're so busy playing king of the castle. They don't realize the walls are crumbling." A chill went down my spine. "What do you mean?" There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I could hear the faint sound of a television in the background. "Your father, he's in trouble. Real trouble. The business isn't doing as well as he pretends. He lost a lot on that new downtown development. He's been borrowing from dangerous places." It all clicked into place. The desperation, the public spectacle. He wasn't just punishing me. He was sending a message to the rest of the family, consolidating what little he had left. "And the inheritance," she continued, her voice dropping to a whisper. "The one they're all fighting over like vultures. Liam, honey, it's mostly gone. Most of it is just smoke and mirrors. That he's trying to cut you out of something that barely exists." This was the first twist, the first piece of the puzzle that changed everything. My family's cruelty wasn't born from a position of strength and wealth. It was born from fear and desperation. That made it even more pathetic and even more dangerous. "Thank you for telling me, Grandma," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "It means a lot. Be careful, Liam. Your father is a cornered animal, and a cornered animal is the most dangerous kind." We hung up, and I sat there in the silence, her words echoing in my ears. Cornered animal. She was right, but I wasn't the prey he thought I was. I picked up my phone again. I didn't scroll through family photos or old messages. I opened a secure messaging app and typed in a name. Mark Thorne. Mark was an investigative journalist I'd met a year ago on a case. He was hungry, tenacious, and had a deep-seated hatred for rich guys who thought the rules didn't apply to them. He was, in short, the perfect person for the job. I typed out a short, encrypted message. "Mark, it's Liam Anderson. I've got a story for you. A big one. Local real estate developer, massive fraud, embezzlement, tax evasion, multiple victims, and I have proof. You interested?" I hit send. Less than 2 minutes later, my phone buzzed. "I'm listening." The storm was no longer just beginning. I had just unleashed the hurricane. We met the next day at a Greasy Spoon diner halfway across town. The kind of place my father wouldn't be caught dead in. Mark Thorne looked exactly as I remembered. Slightly rumpled suit, tired eyes that didn't miss a thing, and a coffee cup that never seemed to be empty. "Liam," he said, shaking my hand. "You look like you've been through it." "You have no idea," I replied, sliding a slim USB drive across the table. "This is the appetizer. The documents my mother accidentally sent me." He plugged it into his laptop right there in the booth. As he scrolled through the files, his tired eyes lit up with a predatory gleam. I could see the headlines forming in his mind. "Holy," he muttered, leaning closer to the screen. "Shell companies, offshore accounts. This is the real deal. Your father, Richard Anderson, in the flesh." "I've heard whispers about him for years," Mark said, looking up at me. "Rumors he plays dirty, but no one's ever had proof. This is a gold mine, but it's not enough to make it stick. We need more. We need victims, people willing to go on the record." "I can get them," I said. My work as a forensic accountant had given me a wide network. I knew people who had dealt with my father and walked away with empty pockets and broken promises. Now I had the leverage to convince them to talk. For the next week, my life became a clandestine operation. By day, I was Liam Anderson, the quiet accountant at my firm. By night, I was an investigator, a ghost digging through my own family skeletons. I spent hours on the phone talking to former business partners of my father's. Small contractors he'd squeezed out of business, families who'd lost their savings in his shady real estate deals. I compiled sworn affidavit, found old email chains, and cross-referenced every claim with the bank statements I had. I was building an airtight case brick by painstaking brick. Meanwhile, my family was getting nervous about my silence. It was making them sloppy. Ethan, in his infinite arrogance, couldn't resist twisting the knife. The texts kept coming. Heard you were disinherited. Guess you'll have to keep playing with your little calculator for a living. Mom's really upset. You embarrassed her by walking out like that. You should apologize. Seriously, dude, just grow up. Dad's waiting for you to beg. Just get it over with. I saved every single one. They were a perfect record of their malice, their complete lack of remorse. They were so busy gloating. They had no idea they were handing me the rope to hang them with. Each taunt, each condescending message just added another file to my folder labeled motive. They thought they were kicking a man who was down. They were actually poking a bear that was building a bazooka, and they were handing him the ammunition. A week after the dinner, the taunts from Ethan suddenly stopped. They were replaced by a different tactic, one I knew all too well. My mother's manipulative olive branch. My phone rang. It was her. Liam. Honey. Her voice was soft, laced with a practiced sadness. What do you want, Mom? I kept my tone flat, professional, the way I'd speak to a hostile witness. I were worried about you, darling. You haven't answered anyone's calls. Your father, he was harsh. He knows that. He just wants what's best for you, and sometimes he doesn't show it in the right way. I almost laughed out loud. What's best for me by publicly humiliating me? The sheer audacity was breathtaking. Is that so? I said, yes, he wants to talk. We all do. Can you come over for dinner on Sunday? Just us. We can sort this all out as a family. It was a trap, and a clumsy one at that. They weren't sorry. They were scared. My silence was a variable they couldn't control. And the Andersons hated anything they couldn't control. They wanted to get me back on their home turf in the lion's den where they could surround me, guilt-trip me, and browbeat me back into my designated box. They wanted me to show my hand. The old Liam would have gone. The old Liam would have craved the sliver of hope that maybe, just maybe, this time they meant it. He would have walked right into that ambush, desperate for a crumb of affection. But the old Liam was gone. He died on the floor of that fancy restaurant. No, I said. The silence on the other end of the line was heavy. I had never said a flat no to my mother before. It was always, I'll try, or I'm busy, but maybe next week. No, she repeated, her voice losing its softness, replaced by a sharp edge of disbelief. What do you mean no? I mean no, thank you. I won't be coming to dinner. Not on Sunday. Not ever. I was calm, my voice even. I think we all know where we stand after last week. There's nothing left to sort out. Liam, don't be ridiculous. She snapped, the mask completely off now. This is your family. Your father is willing to reconsider if you just show a little remorse for your behavior. Remorse for my behavior? For being publicly disowned. The logic was so twisted, so narcissistic, it was almost impressive. They were the ones who had thrown the bomb, and now they were angry that I refused to help them pick up the pieces and pretend it never happened. Tell Dad I said no thanks on the reconsideration. I said I've made my own arrangements. Goodbye, Mom. I hung up before she could reply. I knew what would follow. The smear campaign, the calls to other family members to paint me as ungrateful, as unstable, but it didn't matter anymore. I had just officially declared war, and they had no idea I was the one holding all the weapons. They thought this was a family squabble. I knew it was a criminal investigation, and I was the lead prosecutor. My father didn't take rejection well. He wasn't used to the word no, especially from me. When his attempt to lure me back failed, he switched from manipulation to aggression. He decided to hit me where he thought it would hurt the most. My career. The next day, my boss, Mrs. Davies, called me into her corner office. She was a non-nonsense woman in her late 50s, sharp as a tack, and she ran the fraud detection department at Brighton Wealth Management with an iron fist. She didn't offer me a seat. "Liam," she said, her arms crossed as she looked out the window at the city skyline. "I received a rather interesting phone call this morning." I kept my expression neutral. "Oh, it was from a Richard Anderson. Your father, I presume?" My stomach tightened. "Yes." She turned to face me, her eyes drilling into mine. "He told me quite a story. Said, you've been acting erratically, that you're unstable. He even suggested that you might be compromised, that perhaps you've been accessing confidential client information for personal reasons." It was a classic move from his playbook. Attack the credibility. If you can't win the argument, destroy the person making it. He was trying to get me fired, to strip me of my resources and my reputation, to make me a pariah that no one would believe. He also mentioned, she continued, her voice low, that if the firm were to continue employing someone with my questionable judgment, it might affect his decision on where to move a very substantial portfolio he's looking to invest. The threat, a bribe. He was trying to buy my termination. I met her gaze without flinching. "Mrs. Davies, my performance reviews have been excellent for the past 5 years. I have never had a single complaint filed against me. My record is spotless. Your father is a very powerful man. Liam." "I'm aware," I said, "but he's also a liar. This is a personal family matter he's trying to drag into my professional life. I can assure you I have never and would never compromise this firm or its clients. My loyalty is here." She studied my face for a long moment. I could see the gears turning in her head. She was weighing the risk. A powerful, angry client versus a loyal, higher-forming employee. "For now," she said finally, "I'm taking you at your word. But I'm warning you, Liam. Whatever this family drama is, keep it out of my office. If it affects your work or this firm's reputation in any way, you'll be out of a job. Do you understand?" "Perfectly," I said. I walked out of her office, my heart hammering against my ribs. He had fired a warning shot. He had shown me how far he was willing to go. He thought it would scare me into backing down. It did the exact opposite. It solidified my resolve. He hadn't just attacked me. He'd attacked my livelihood. The one thing I had built for myself completely separate from him. He had crossed a line. And he was about to find out that when you corner someone with nothing left to lose, they fight back with everything they have. My father, being the narcissist he was, couldn't comprehend that his attempt to get me fired had failed. In his world, money and influence always won. So, when I still showed up to work the next day, he escalated. He made his second and most fatal mistake. He sent his lawyer after Mark Thorne. I was in my cubicle trying to focus on a new case file when my secure messaging app buzzed. It was Mark. "Call me now. Urgent." I grabbed my phone and ducked into an empty conference room. "Mark, what's going on?" "Your father's a piece of work. I'll tell you that," he said, his voice a mix of anger and excitement. "We just got a call from his lawyer, a real shark from one of those big downtown firms. He threatened to sue me, my editor, and the entire newspaper for defamation if we publish one word of these baseless and malicious lies." My blood ran cold. He was trying to intimidate the press. "Did it work?" I asked, my voice tight. Mark laughed. A short, sharp bark. "Work? Liam. Guys like my editor live for threats like this. It's like waving a red flag at a bull." Before the call, he was telling me to be cautious, to double-check every source. Now he sees blood in the water. An aggressive threat like that doesn't scream innocence. It screams, "I have something to hide, and I'm terrified you're going to find it." This was the second twist. Richard's heavy-handed attempt to silence the story was the very thing that convinced the newspaper it was true. His arrogance had become his undoing. "So, what does that mean?" I asked. "It means we're not waiting," Mark said, his voice dropping. The plan was to spend another week gathering more witness statements, building the case even stronger. But the lawyer's threat changes the timeline. "My editor is worried your father will try to get a court injunction to block the story. He wants to go to print before they have the chance." I took a deep breath. This was it, the point of no return. "When?" "Tonight." Mark said the article goes live on the website at 9 p.m. sharp. Are you ready for this, Liam? Because once it's out there, there's no going back. All hell is going to break loose. I looked out the conference room window at the city my father thought he owned. He had thrown down the gauntlet, thinking he was untouchable. He had tried to ruin my career, my reputation. He had threatened the free press. He had pushed and pushed, expecting me to break. Mark, I said, my voice steady and cold as ice. Let it burn. At 9 p.m. on the dot, my world exploded. I was sitting in my apartment, staring at the homepage of the city's largest online newspaper. I hit refresh and there it was. The headline was plastered across the top of the screen in big bold letters. The Anderson Empire built on fraud and deceit. Below it was a picture of my father smiling at a charity gala. The contrast was sickening. The article was brutal, methodical, and backed up with undeniable proof. Mark had done an incredible job. He laid out the shell companies, the offshore accounts, the nonprofit scam. He had quotes from 2 former business partners on the record detailing how Richard had cheated them. He had included anonymized statements from contractors who had been driven to bankruptcy. It was a masterpiece of investigative journalism. It was a character assassination, and every single word of it was true. For a few minutes, there was an eerie silence. The calm before the storm. Then my phone started buzzing. And it didn't stop. The first call was from my mother. I let it go to voicemail. The second, third, and fourth were from her, too. Then came the aunts, the uncles, the cousins. An avalanche of missed calls and frantic, furious texts. What did you do? From my Aunt Clara. You've destroyed this family. I hope you're happy. From a cousin I hadn't spoken to in years. I turned my phone on silent, but the screen kept lighting up, a constant strobe of their panic and rage. Then there was a loud, frantic pounding on my apartment door. Liam, open this door. I know you're in there. It was Ethan. And from the sound of it, Chloe was with him. I took a deep breath and walked to the door. I opened it. They stood there, their faces pale and twisted with fury. Ethan looked like he wanted to hit me. Chloe was already in tears, not of sadness, but of rage. How could you? Ethan spat, pushing his way into my apartment. How could you do this to your own father, to your family? The man in that article is a criminal, Ethan, I said calmly. He's not just my father. He's a thief who has ruined people's lives. He's a good man, Chloe shrieked. He gave us everything. And you ungrateful snake. You stab him in the back. What did he give you, Chloe? I shot back, my voice rising for the first time. A clothing store that he funded with money he stole from a fake charity for poor kids. Is that what you're so proud of? Her face went white. She knew. Of course she knew. They all knew on some level. They just chose not to look. They were happy to spend the blood money as long as they didn't have to see where it came from. Dad wants to work this out, Ethan said, his tone shifting slightly, a hint of desperation creeping in. He was trying to sound intimidating, but I could hear the fear. He's willing to forgive you if you'll just publicly retract everything. Tell them the journalist made it all up. I laughed. A cold, empty sound. Forgive me for what? For telling the truth. It's too late for that, Ethan. The wheels are already in motion. This isn't about family drama anymore. This is about justice. Justice? Ethan scoffed. You wouldn't know the first thing about justice. This is revenge because you were always jealous of me. If that's what you need to tell yourself to sleep at night, go ahead, I said, walking to the door and holding it open. Now get out of my apartment. They stared at me, dumbfounded. They had come expecting me to be scared, to be cornered. They couldn't comprehend that I was the one who had set the fire. They left sputtering threats and insults, but their words had no power anymore. They were just noise. The truth was out. The fire was spreading, and I was the one holding the matchbox. The article wasn't just a story. It was a trigger. The online version was read by hundreds of thousands of people within 24 hours. The next morning, it was the front page headline of the print edition. Every news channel in the city was talking about it. The name Richard Anderson, once a symbol of success and power, was now synonymous with fraud. And the authorities were listening. 2 days after the article went live, the state attorney general's office held a press conference. I watched it streaming on my laptop. A stern-faced woman stood at a podium flanked by investigators. In light of the serious allegations brought to light by the recent investigative report into Anderson Development, she announced, "Our office is launching a full and immediate investigation into Mr. Richard Anderson and his associated businesses for potential fraud, embezzlement, and tax evasion." That was it. The official nail in the coffin. It was real. It was happening. My father, true to form, released an arrogant statement through his lawyer, calling the article a work of fiction and a smear campaign orchestrated by a disgruntled family member. He was going to fight it. He was going to bury us all in legal fees. He thought he still had time. He was wrong. The feds had been watching him, too. The evidence in Mark's article gave them the probable cause they needed to act, and to act fast. The next morning, I got a text from Mark. It was just a link to a live news feed. I clicked it. The camera was shaky, positioned across the street from the Summit Club, the ridiculously exclusive private club where my father held court every morning. And then I saw it. 2 black sedans pulled up to the curb. Men in dark suits with FBI emblazoned on the back of their jackets got out and walked calmly through the front doors. The camera zoomed in through the large windows. I could see my father sitting at his usual table holding a newspaper, a look of indignation on his face. The agents approached him. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but I could see the color drain from his face. His arrogance evaporated, replaced by a slack-jawed look of pure, unadulterated shock. One of the agents pulled out a pair of handcuffs. The whole club went silent. Everyone was staring. The great Richard Anderson, the titan of industry, was being told to stand up and put his hands behind his back. He was led out of the club, his head down, the cameras flashing in his face. He looked small, defeated. That was the main reveal, the final spectacular twist. The world didn't know the specifics, but in that moment, the truth was laid bare. The son he had publicly cast out, the quiet accountant he had mocked and belittled his entire life, was the architect of his downfall. The power he worshipped, the money, the status, the reputation had been dismantled by the one thing he never valued. The quiet, methodical pursuit of the truth. My truth. I watched as they put him in the back of the sedan and drove away. My mother, Eleanor, arrived moments later, her face a mask of horror as reporters swarmed her. I didn't feel joy. I didn't feel hatred. I felt quiet. I felt the release of a pressure that had been building inside me for 29 years. The war was over and I had won. This was the moment that changed everything. When justice finally caught up with him, "Thank you for sticking with me to this point. You are amazing. If you could do me a huge favor and like this video and comment the number 1 down below, it lets me know you've been on this journey with me. It not only helps more people find this story, but it also tells me that my experiences mean something to someone out there. Your support is the single biggest motivation for me to continue sharing the rest of this journey." The arrest was the earthquake. What followed were the aftershocks, and they were devastating. With my father in federal custody and denied bail due to being a flight risk, his empire crumbled almost overnight. The Attorney General's office moved swiftly to freeze all his assets and by extension my family's. The river of money that had fueled their lives was turned off like a tap. The fallout was immediate and brutal. My mother's credit cards were declined. Ethan was fired from his no-show consulting job because the company was now under federal investigation. Chloe's boutique, which was being propped up by the fake foundation, went bankrupt within a week. The life they had known was simply over. The calls I received changed in tone. The fury was replaced by a desperate, pleading hysteria. It was mostly my mother. She left long, rambling voicemails, alternating between blaming me for destroying the family and begging me to call the Attorney General. To tell them it was all a misunderstanding. As if I could just call off an FBI investigation like a dog. I never listened to a full message. I just deleted them. At work, things were different. The day after the arrest, Mrs. Davies called me back into her office. This time, she offered me a seat. "I owe you an apology, Liam," she said, her voice sincere. "Your father tried to ruin you. You maintained your professionalism under extreme pressure. I respect that. Thank you, Mrs. Davies." I said, "Bright Fawn has been hired by several of the victims in your father's case," she continued, getting straight to business. "They need an expert to trace the stolen assets for the restitution part of the trial. Someone who knows exactly where to look." She paused, looking at me pointedly. "I can't think of anyone more qualified for the job. We're giving you a promotion. You'll be leading the recovery team." It was poetic justice. My own firm was now paying me a higher salary to hunt down the money my father had stolen. The skills he had belittled were the very ones being used to clean up his mess and bring justice to the people he had harmed. For the first time, my work wasn't just about numbers on a page. It was about rebuilding lives. It was about taking the pain my family had caused and turning it into something positive. I was no longer just the son of a criminal. I was the advocate for his victims. It was a purpose I had never expected and one I embraced with everything I had. A month before the trial was set to begin, I got a message from an unknown number. "I need to see you, please. It's your mother." It came with an address for a small coffee shop in a suburb I'd never been to. Part of me wanted to ignore it, but another part knew I needed to do this. I needed one final clean break. She was already there when I arrived, sitting at a small table in the corner. She looked older, tired. The designer clothes were gone, replaced by something simple, generic. The confidence, the arrogance, it had all been stripped away. "Liam," she said, her voice barely a whisper as I sat down. "Mom," I replied, my voice neutral. She fidgeted with a paper napkin, tearing it into tiny pieces. "Your father, his lawyers say the case is bad. They're talking about a plea deal, but he'll still go to prison for a long time." I didn't say anything. I just waited. "I don't understand why you did this," she said, her eyes welling up with tears. But they weren't tears of remorse. They were tears of self-pity. "We were a family. You had everything. Why would you throw it all away? Why would you destroy us?" There it was. Not, "I'm so sorry for how we treated you." Not, "Your father was wrong." It was still somehow my fault. I was the one who had destroyed things by simply telling the truth about the rotten foundation their lives were built on. "You're asking the wrong question, Mom," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "The question isn't why I did this. The question is why you and Dad did what you did. Why you stole from people, why you treated me like dirt my entire life. Why you thought there would never be any consequences. He's your father," she cried, her voice rising. "And you're my mother," I countered. A mother who smiled while her husband publicly humiliated her son. A mother who was a willing accomplice to his crimes. I leaned forward. "You want to know what this is about? This isn't about the inheritance. This isn't even about revenge. This is about the end of a lie. The lie that we were a happy, successful family. We were a criminal conspiracy wrapped in a Christmas card." She stared at me speechless. The truth was a language she didn't understand. "The family you're talking about," I continued, standing up. "It ended for me that night at the restaurant. You're strangers to me now. Strangers who are about to face the consequences of their actions. I wish you the best of luck with that." I turned and walked away. I didn't look back. That was the last time I ever spoke to her. I felt no anger, no sadness, just a profound sense of release. The final chain had been broken. I was free. 1 year can change everything. The trial was a 6-week media circus. I had to testify, laying out the complex financial web my father had woven. I presented the evidence clinically, dispassionately. I wasn't his son on that stand. I was an expert witness. The jury found him guilty on all counts. The judge, citing the callous and predatory nature of his crimes, sentenced him to 15 years in federal prison. There would be no parole. Now, a year after the sentencing, the silence is what I notice most. Peaceful, healing silence. I'm standing on the balcony of my new condo. It's not huge, but it's mine. It overlooks a park, not a concrete jungle. The promotion at work became permanent, and my salary allowed me to afford a life I was proud of, one I had built with my own 2 hands. My work is fulfilling. We've managed to recover nearly 70% of the stolen assets for the victims. Some have been able to restart their businesses. One family was able to send their daughter to college. My numbers have a real-world impact now. They represent hope. Life is quiet, the simple. I have a small circle of good friends who know me for me, not for my last name. We go to baseball games. We grab beers. We talk about normal things. It's a life I never knew was possible. My phone buzzes with an email notification. I glance at it. The name in the sender field is my Uncle Robert, the same uncle who had raised his glass to family loyalty as I was being downed. I open it out of a morbid curiosity. The email is long and rambling. It talks about how tough things have been since the unfortunate business with Richard. He lost his job, his wife. My Aunt Clara is talking about divorce. He paints a picture of a man wronged by circumstance. Then he gets to the point. And so I was wondering as family if you might be able to help me out with a small loan to get back on my feet. I know you're doing well for yourself now, and I've always been so proud of you. This was the final pathetic twist. Even after everything, after the public disgrace, the prison sentence, the complete implosion of their world, they still didn't get it. They hadn't learned a thing. To him, I wasn't a person. I was a resource, an ATM. He felt no remorse for his part in my humiliation. He just saw that I had landed on my feet and wanted a piece of it. I didn't feel anger. I felt a profound sense of pity and then a profound sense of gratitude. Gratitude that I was no longer a part of their toxic transactional world. I held my finger over the screen for a moment. Then I hit delete. I took a sip of my coffee and looked out at the morning sun hitting the trees in the park. The past was gone and the future was finally mine. The only connection I keep to that old life is my grandmother, Isabella. We have lunch every other Sunday. It's the one piece of family that I chose to keep, the one relationship that was built on genuine affection, not obligation or greed. She's the one who gives me the updates in her own matter-of-fact way. I never ask, but she seems to know I need to hear them to close the book on those chapters of my life. Their paths are their own, paved by the choices they made. "And you, Liam?" she asks, reaching across the table and patting my hand. Her touch is warm, real. "Are you happy?" I think about it for a moment. I think about the quiet of my apartment, the satisfaction of my work, the easy laughter with my friends, the absence of anxiety, the feeling of not having to perform or pretend. "Yeah, Grandma," I say, and the smile that spreads across my face is real. I think I am. We finish our lunch talking about her garden and a new book she's reading. It's normal. It's peaceful. It's the kind of family I always wanted. Turns out I didn't have to destroy a family to find one. I just had to escape the wrong one to finally build my own. Tonight I'm standing on my balcony again. Looking out at the city lights is a view I've earned. From this distance, the world looks peaceful, orderly. It's hard to imagine all the chaotic, messy lives playing out down there. For a long time, I thought what I wanted was revenge. I wanted them to hurt the way they hurt me. When my father was led away in handcuffs, a part of me thought, "That's it. I've won." But I was wrong. Watching his world burn didn't bring me joy. It brought me quiet. The silencing of the loud, critical voices that had lived in my head for my entire life. The voices that told me I wasn't good enough, smart enough, or worthy enough. What I did wasn't about destroying them. It was about liberating myself. The greatest victory wasn't seeing my father in prison or my brother humbled. It was the moment I realized I didn't need their approval to feel whole. My value isn't tied to an inheritance or a family name. It's tied to my principles, to my integrity, to the fact that when I was faced with a choice between protecting a corrupt family and standing up for what was right, I chose what was right. They thought my greatest weakness was my quiet nature, my refusal to play their loud, aggressive games. They never understood that my real power was my ability to see the truth they had buried so deep and my patience to wait for the right moment to bring it into the light. The Anderson Empire is in ashes. But I'm not standing in the rubble. I'm standing on new ground, ground that I cleared and built myself. And for the first time, when I look up at the sky, it doesn't feel like it's about to fall. It just feels open, full of possibilities. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I hope it connected with you in some way. It's a long and complicated journey, but sharing it makes it feel a little lighter. Have you ever been in a situation where you had to choose between your family and what you knew was right? I'd be humbled to read about your experience. Please share your story in the comments below. And don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss what I have to share next. Your support truly means the